We think of fraud as a modern problem. Billion-dollar Ponzi schemes, crypto scams, corporate accounting scandals. But the truth is, fraud is as old as money itself. The tools have changed, but the playbook has remained the same for thousands of years. Human greed is timeless. Long before the stock market was even invented, ancient scammers were pulling off schemes so audacious they make modern fraudsters look unimaginative. Today, we're opening the history books to uncover 5 of the world's first scams. These are the original gangsters of fraud. Our first story takes us back to 300 BC, to the world of Greek sea merchants. A man named Hegestratos was a ship owner who transported corn across the Mediterranean. But Hegestratos was in debt, and he came up with a brilliant and fraudulent new business model. He took out a type of insurance policy called a bottomry. It was a loan, but with a special clause. If the ship and its cargo were lost at sea, the loan didn't have to be repaid. The lender took all the risk. Hegestratos saw an opportunity. His plan was simple. First, he would borrow a large sum of money against his ship and its valuable cargo of corn. Then, he would secretly sell the corn before setting sail. Finally, he would intentionally sink his empty ship in the middle of the ocean, claim it was a tragic accident, and walk away with both the loan money and the money from selling the corn. It was the world's first insurance fraud. But he made one crucial mistake. He tried to sink the ship while his own crew and passengers were still on board. They caught him in the act. Panicked, Hegestratos jumped overboard to escape the angry mob. He never resurfaced. The first recorded insurance fraudster was brought to justice not by a court, but by the sea itself. Even before the Greeks, the ancient Egyptians had mastered the art of the skim. In a cashless society, taxes were paid in goods, primarily grain. It was the job of the tax collector to weigh each farmer's harvest and take the government's share. But these officials quickly realized they could manipulate the system. By using inaccurate weights, they could trick farmers into overpaying their taxes. They would then pocket the surplus grain and sell it on the black market. It was a simple, effective, and widespread scam. The penalty for getting caught was severe. Theft from the state was a heinous crime, but for many, the temptation was too great. By the time of the Roman Republic, fraud had become more sophisticated. Gaius Verres was the governor of Sicily from 73 to 71 BC. His job was to manage the province and collect taxes for Rome. Instead, he treated it as his personal piggy bank. Verres was a master of extortion. He demanded exorbitant taxes from farmers, looted priceless art from temples and private homes, and manipulated grain prices for his own benefit. He was so corrupt that the people of Sicily, after years of suffering, finally hired a young, ambitious lawyer to prosecute him. That lawyer's name was Cicero. Cicero's speeches against Verres, known as the Verrine Orations, are legendary. He laid out the governor's crimes in such excruciating detail that Verres, knowing he was doomed, fled into exile before the trial was even over. He was convicted in absentia and forced to pay a massive fine. It was one of the first major public corruption trials in history. But our next Roman scam is by far the most audacious. It's the year 193 AD. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards, have just assassinated their boss, Emperor Pertinax. Now, with a power vacuum, they decide to do the unthinkable. They put the Roman Empire up for auction, literally. They announced that whoever paid them the most money could become the next emperor. 2 men competed for the prize. The winner was a wealthy senator named Didius Julianus, who offered a staggering 25,000 sesterces to every single soldier in the guard. It was a bribe of epic proportions. Julianus was declared emperor. But there was a small problem with the deal. The Praetorian Guard didn't actually own the Roman Empire. The powerful legions stationed in other parts of the empire were furious. They refused to recognize Julianus and instead proclaimed their own generals as emperor. 3 different armies began marching on Rome. The Praetorian Guard, seeing they had bagged the wrong horse, abandoned their puppet emperor. Didius Julianus, the man who bought the empire, was executed after a reign of just 66 days. It was the ultimate scam, proving that even if you can afford to buy the world, it doesn't mean you get to keep it. Our final story takes us to the Renaissance and involves one of the greatest artists of all time. In 1496, a 20-year-old Michelangelo was a struggling artist. To make a name for himself, he sculpted a beautiful statue of a sleeping Cupid. Then, he artificially aged it to make it look like a recently discovered ancient Roman artifact. He sold the forgery to a cardinal, who was a powerful art dealer. The cardinal was fooled, but when he discovered the truth, he was furious. However, he was also so impressed by the quality of the forgery that he didn't punish Michelangelo. In fact, fact, the scandal ended up launching Michelangelo's career, as it proved he could sculpt just as well as the ancient masters. It was a fraud that failed, but in doing so, made him famous. From sinking ships to selling empires, the history of fraud is a history of human ingenuity applied to crime. The methods have evolved from crooked scales to complex code, but the motivation remains the same. These ancient stories remind us that while technology changes, human nature never does. And there will always be someone, somewhere, trying to sell you an empire they don't own.